The southern Alentejo region is one of my favorites to hike in. From the vast sidelines to impressive valleys and plains, it's one of the most diverse regions I've been to in Portugal, and I'm weirdly fascinated by the culture. It's isolated, so you know their beliefs are ancient as shit, but you get the feeling it's ancient not because the globalists are erasing history and the woke feminazis made the M&Ms ugly. More so that they've never been exposed to any other worldview. It's fascinating. If you go there and visit the villages, you can often see the people just going about their day or sitting casually at the entrances to their homes. You see a semblance of a life you don't really find anywhere else anymore. Eventually, if you hike far enough, you come across these villages. These villages that have houses falling apart. You can find maybe 2 people living there or sometimes no one at all. The southern Alentejo is a desert, in more ways than one. Yes, rain doesn't fall there during the summer, but the population there has been decreasing rapidly in the last couple of years. In the span of 10 years, villages' populations were cut in half from their previous 100 or so inhabitants. New empty settlements are recorded as the old folks die and the young ones leave to find work in the big city. We've reached a point that the 2 biggest cities easily account for around 30% of the population of the country. This video isn't made to make you think that is bad. It's the way of the world. People need to live and people want the best for themselves, as they should. And by God, these villages just can't give that. This, if anything, is to express my sadness at the death of a culture that needs to be preserved, at the disappearance of a history that should have been saved. And I think the best way to exemplify this is with the story of Couto Misto, the 5th Iberian nation that you've never heard of. Couto Misto was a very small nation-state sandwiched at the Portuguese northern border with Galicia. It was made up of around 3 villages, Rubiás, Meaus, and Santiago de Rubiás. It was estimated that in the years prior to its annexation to Spain and Portugal, Couto Misto had a population of about 1,000 people. The only nation today that has a smaller population count is the fucking Vatican. Accounting for the higher population that the planet has today when compared to the 19th century would not help this country's state. Remember, this is 3 villages in the middle of fucking nowhere. The population count would actually be lower. Couto Misto is a fucking anomaly. It's 30 square kilometers. There's nothing. I mean, if you were just to go there, plant a flag, say this is yours, there's nothing the locals could do. Nothing. And no one else would care. You think Germany or the Russian Tsars would care if Spain suddenly invaded a patch of grass in its own yard? But despite living through the age of empires, Couto Misto just stood there for centuries. Apparently since before the time of Portugal's formation. Now, here is everything we know about Couto Misto's unique and fascinating history. Quack! That's what we know. Oh, and shit diddly. We know quack and shit diddly. We know that the country was formed sometime in the 10th century at the height of the feudal system, where the needlessly complicated laws of inheritance would see entire kingdoms fall under the control of one man, or kingdoms would split apart, all because of inheritance. We don't know how the country formed exactly. I mean, the feudal era was a time where European nations were governing in a highly decentralized manner. The kings held some power, yeah, but by and large, the nobility ruled lands almost independently, paying lip service to monarchs at best. In Iberia itself, it was a time that the Catholic monarchs of the peninsula were firmly under the Muslim boot, and the Reconquista was on the side of the Cordoban Caliphate. But it was a time where the feudal system of Europe had established itself quite well in the peninsula. People in Couto Misto spoke Galician, Portuguese, Castellano, Spanish. They had a direct democracy, electing judges as heads of state and having a sort of assembly to solve matters of their nation. We can say, however, that during Couto's existence, a deal was made with the two big countries of Iberia, Spain and Portugal. That being that anyone who was born in this country could choose either to be given Portuguese nationality or Spanish nationality. We don't have a date for when this deal was made, but given, the whole Spanish thing, we can assume this deal was made after the formation of Spain, so sometime after the country's declaration, 1560. The people who chose the Portuguese nationality drank a cup of wine, toasted to the King of Portugal, and painted a P on their doorstep. Those who chose Spain again would toast to the Spanish king and paint a G on their door. Beyond that, residents of Couto Misto had all the usual benefits of foreign citizens in someone else's territory. They didn't have to serve in the military, they didn't need any paperwork, they were someone else's citizens. Again, it's a 30 square kilometer nation sandwiched between two other larger nations. But Couto Misto doesn't exist anymore. I mean, it's shocking how long it lasted, but it's not shocking that it ended. But it ended in 1868, possibly 800 years after it was founded. It would be making around 1,000 if it was still around today. An age that's uncomparable to San Marino. But that country is almost 2,000 years old. So, it's a senile old man with a bullet to the head versus a sentient pile of dust. And it also wasn't like a violent end. It was just what I described earlier on. The independence of Portugal left the country's northern border unclear and muddy, something which neither Spain nor Portugal could accept. So they changed that in the Treaty of Lisbon of 1864, which went into effect 4 years later. Portugal and Spain, while cleaning up their northern border, partitioned Couto Misto. Spain got the lion's share of the 30 kilometers, while Portugal got a small strip of land to the south. Thanks, Spain. Not even letting us suppress more subjects. And that was it. That's the end. Okay, thanks for watching. Second video on Afonso Henriques is next. Okay, bye. Yeah, not really. How do we know this? How do we know all this stuff? How do we know that the locals had their weird sort of tradition on picking nationality, or that it was a direct democracy and all that jazz? Because of one of the last judges, a man called Delfim Modesto Brandão, who wrote about the country. Delfim was a Portuguese man who moved to Couto Misto and was appointed as the judge in 1863. He wanted to end the near constant abuse of the country's sovereignty by both Portuguese and Spanish authorities. But he quit just a year after, when the annexation by Portugal and Spain became clear. The last judge, unnamed in his memoirs, ruled for the remainder of his term. Delfim moved to Spain and worked in local administrations for a while, publishing his book on the end of Couto Misto in 1904, which is called Interessante Historieta del Couto Misto. I desperately want to know if there's a Portuguese translation of this book, and if so, I fucking want to own it. There are legends about the area's independence, stories that reach us from word of mouth, but their truth, as always, is debatable. Couto Misto's legend is that in a heavy snowstorm, a lone pregnant Galician princess was walking about, close to death and also to birth. She collapsed outside of the Couto Misto villages, and she was saved by the residents. After her child was born in the village, she was so grateful for the help that she granted the whole area independence. There's also the fact that we know the country was formed in the 10th century, but the first written records we got date back to around 1147, so to around the time that Portugal achieved independence. I may be reaching here, but bear with me, please. What if there is some truth to that whole princess pregnant legend? While not necessarily a one pregnant princess, maybe a whole convoy of some important lord went through there. A snowstorm formed and they needed a place to stay. Yes, the Couto Misto residents were all friendly and fun, and the lord in question was so charmed that he decided, alright, you know what? You guys can forget about taxes and, rule yourselves, but you're still loyal to me, to Galicia. So, not really granting independence, but more autonomy. And then when Big Dick Afonso came riding around causing chaos in Galicia and saying, nah dude, we ain't paying taxes to some weirdo in a different castle, we're all paying taxes to me, a weirdo in a different castle. Couto Misto could have taken the opportunity to declare independence. They probably wouldn't even need to fight. There are 30 square kilometers max of territory. But again, that's me assuming we don't know shit. You wanna know what I'm basing this off of? A fucking fairy tale and people acknowledging Couto Misto exists at a certain date. That is it. But that was it. That is the story of Couto Misto. I've told it to you and provided as much context as my ketamine-fueled brain is capable of. And why? Why should we know more? It's 3 fucking villages. Hell, why does this qualify as content? Why not continue my series on Afonso Henriques? Make a fast review of Midnight Ghost Hunt. Good game. Or Layers of Fear 2023. A less good game. Or complain about Dying Light 2 again. Hell, I could revive my What Happened to Exiled Royal Families video series. I've been meaning to talk about the current claimant to the Russian imperial throne. Why do 3 villages in a fucking cow field matter? Because these empty fields, these abandoned houses, are part of Iberian history. So much happened in these places, not just Couto Misto, but everywhere in the interior of the peninsula. I have a far too big of an interest in geopolitics. I like to observe and see how countries behave amongst each other, how they try to support each other, tear each other down, and how in the end, it's all kind of a self-serving purpose. What I'm about to spout may be Russia propaganda 101, but it's kinda true. The Ukraine war has become a proxy war between the West and Russia. We're getting something out of that war if Ukraine wins, so why shouldn't we support them? Again, this is basically gonna make those Z-bots happy, but not a single country is supplying weapons to Ukraine because we legitimately believe in their fight. We give them missiles, F-16s, tanks, and heavy weapons because we hate Russia and want them weakened so they don't threaten us. And that's fine, Putin hates us too. Geopolitics is kind of the classroom gossip to that spider that snuck in. It's fine, it's interesting, and unlike actual gossip, kind of important, but there is one aspect of this gossip that is too often ignored. Hell, I ignore it too. How does the spider feel about it? There's content to be made from big nations discussing or making agreements on future actions, sure. But it's just as important to focus on the human element to it, on how these actions impact the individuals living here. The Ukraine war has sparked one of the biggest refugee crises since World War II, and an ever-increasing debate on how much support should be given to Ukraine. Delphine, given the fact that he resigned when he learned about the impending annexation, must have been greatly saddened and disappointed by the fact. And what did Portugal and Spain think about what they were doing? Well, They had been constantly abusing Couto Misto's sovereignty, and the Treaty of Lisbon was a treaty to fix their northern border, not a treaty to partition Couto Misto. That should tell you the consideration that they had for the country. The Treaty of Lisbon is not a tragedy. Let's make that fucking clear here. The existence of Couto Misto itself was an anomaly, and the treaty was inevitable. What is a tragedy is that no one has bothered to write down anything about the country's history besides Delphine, a man who lived in it for maybe less than a decade, and nowadays the population of Couto Misto is severely reduced and only growing smaller. But interest in it has increased to the point that there is an organization devoted to the preservation of the area's unique culture. It's the Associação de Amigos do Couto Misto, or Association of Couto Misto's Friends. That's awesome. This organization is pushing for an interesting deal. They want to give the people of Couto Misto the chance to choose Portuguese and Spanish nationality, sort of reviving the old deal that the country had, and giving the area a similar status to that of Orivinça, which should be ours, by the way. Yes, there are efforts throughout the peninsula to both change, prevent, and conserve the history of rural areas, but it's not enough. I'm always going to have an interest in the large geopolitical stuff going on. I've been glued to the screen for the past 2 years just reading about and learning everything about the war in Ukraine, but an aspect that I confess I haven't appreciated enough is the human element. No one wrote down the story of Couto Misto, except for the man who watched the end of its story and recorded how the country worked. And so many villages in Portugal and Spain haven't had their histories written down, and they never will. The story of Couto Misto is one that you should know about. I find it so interesting, in fact, that this video is a secret continuation of my exiled royal family's video series. That's right, everything's planned. Except, I'm not really asking what happened to Couto's royal family, I'm asking what happened to the country itself. And the answer? It was partitioned. And then what happened to it is what happened everywhere else. People left to find better jobs. We know what happened to it, but we don't know the beginning of its story nor its middle. The same will keep happening all throughout the interior of the peninsula, unless something drastic changes. Villages will gradually lose more and more people until their unique history is lost forever. If there's anything to take from this video, is this. Learn history, kids, and write shit down whenever something cool happens. I guarantee, if not your generation, then future generations will appreciate that. Thanks for watching.